Hello, everyone. I'll ask you to take a seat because we've got people on the webinar already joined us. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll make a start. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Matt McNamara. I'm not with Monsoon Communications or FB Rice. However, I'm a client of Monsoon. I wear several non-exec director hats in the biotech sector, as well as run a biotech fund called Horizon 3. Horizon 3 is an evergreen fund that invests in Australian public and private biotech healthcare companies and private international biotechs. Thanks to FB Rice for hosting tonight, the Twilight Investor Briefing Series, and of course Monsoon for making them happen. For our webinar audience who are up in that camera, we will have some questions. Hang on, here we go. Please note that you can submit questions at any time via the Q&A button down the bottom of the screen, I presume. Today we have two seasoned biotech CEOs. Notice I didn't say veterans. They will each present for around 15 minutes and allowing 5 minutes for question time. So they'll be getting a warning at about 13 minutes. So hopefully we'll have some time for questions. There are some pre-submitted questions. Now, first up, I'll introduce Richard Jagger. He's CEO of Bio-Gene. As some of you will know, Bio-Gene is an Australian agtech development company with a novel technology platform using naturally occurring plant compounds. They aim to address the increasing global concerns of insecticide resistance and toxicity in crop protection, grain storage, and public and animal health and consumer application. They have agreements signed with large global corporations such as Clark Mosquito Control and Evergreen Garden Care. Now to Richard. Richard has over 20 years experience in the agricultural sector, working for Fortune 500 companies around the world. He managed the introduction of Australia's first agricultural biotech products into the cotton sector. Having worked as a senior executive manager for Monsanto within Australia and New Zealand, he has extensive knowledge of the local business and distribution network, as well as the major crop protection companies globally. He co-created the Australian subsidiary of Sinochem, one of the largest crop protection companies in China, in the role of managing director. He was previously a board member of Crop Life Australia. Richard is a founding member of Victoria's clean tech sector, designed to support, consolidate, and promote clean, sustainable technology for use around the world. Please join me in welcoming Richard.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you attending, both virtually and in person. It's nice to see 3D faces again. Thank you to our host, FB Rice. We really appreciate the effort to help put these on, and to Monsoon Communications as well. I've been introduced, so I won't bore you with that again, but I'd like to talk to you about this project that I've been involved with for about 5 or so years now, and really why this has caught my attention after a long time in the ag industry. And it comes around about why we've got issues with insecticides and controlling them from both a food security point of view and a public health point of view. So let's talk a little bit about what that issue is. So I mentioned that we currently have issues with the effectiveness of chemistry due to the development of resistance by populations of pests out there. And I'm sure everyone can appreciate that over time. We overuse something and it loses its effectiveness, and we either have to use more and more, or we have to try and find something else. Now, since we started inventing chemistry for insecticides in about the 1940s, we've only ever come up with about 30 different types of chemistry and how we classify them. And we're actually now down to about 5 of those because of resistance and because of concerns about toxicity. So the other concern is we're taking products off the market because we're concerned about their toxic profiles. So this gives us less and less arsenal, if you like, to control pests in a world that's changing very quickly as far as issues go with food security and public health. So I've mentioned up there, everyone knows the population is growing, and we expect it to be growing to about 10 billion by 2050. So that means more mouths to feed, and more food to grow. With climate change occurring, and particularly with average temperatures going up, we see an impact on food production. So we get more weather events that can wipe out crops, etc. So it makes it harder to get an average production per hectare. But we also increase the habitable environment for mosquitoes as the global temperatures warm up. And that has an impact of potentially spreading more of the diseases that they transmit. Astonishing number on what food is actually lost due to insect eating it or damaging that crop. Around about $2 trillion per year is the estimation, so a staggering figure. The impact of malaria is no less concerning and alarming. Direct costs about 12 billion, but the economic impact's many more times than that. The social impact, well, vector-borne diseases currently represent about 25% of all diseases, infectious diseases at the moment, and roughly 50% of the world's population is at risk of exposure to these. And that's only growing as temperatures warm up and the environment is more suitable for mosquitoes. And again, we have to grow more food, but we've got less land to do that on as populations increase, and changing climate conditions make it more difficult to grow food. So what do? This is the problem we've got. So what are we looking at? We've got two products that are the basis of a family of chemistry we have some IP around, which are a naturally based chemistry that has a completely different way of controlling pests than any product on the market today. I'll talk a bit more about that because it's really significant. It's how they work is very different, which means they haven't been exposed to it before, and they are less likely to have any resistance. And so there's an ability to cut through that defense mechanism, if you like, and control the pest. The two products we have, first one is called Qcide. It's a natural oil extract from a significantly rare cultivar of eucalypt called Mesmate. It's grown up in far north Queensland. And we extract that oil, and it has a very high level of the active ingredient within that oil. The second product, Flavocide, is a natural product as well. However, it's not found in quantities that would make that commercially viable. So we synthesize that with a new IP protected process, so we can make that in factories and whatever around the world. So what makes our products potentially a lot more valuable to the world, and answering the questions of how we control these pests that are impacting us today? As I mentioned, naturally derived chemistry is really important in this day and age where people are really demanding to understand what happens in the production of their food, but also the protection of their families and their pets in the environment around them. And natural products have a great perception about being safer and more sustainable for use. Our chemistry is very safe. In the testing we've done to date, we've shown very low impact on bees in particular, and also other important beneficial insects. We've been able to demonstrate its efficacy, its ability to work on populations of pests that are resistant to other chemistry. And we can work across numbers of markets. We don't have just one aspect that we can use this technology. It's applicable to a number of areas where we use insecticides. And as mentioned, we've got a number of current partnerships, and we're working with other people on developing access to market, and I will talk about that more. But back to this point in the blue box, the novel mode of action is what really caught my eye, why this stuff is significant, because it has a way of controlling these pests that we've effectively lost the fight to control by attacking them in a different mechanism. Just mention the last point there, these are quite rare. I mentioned we're down to about 5 different classes of chemistry that we rely on. The last one came to market back in 2008, so they don't turn up every day. They're quite rare to find. The overall market, where do we use insecticides? Well, the biggest section is in crop protection, the green section there. That includes what we call grain storage. So everyone knows about the painted silos around Australia now. Well, they store grain, that's their major purpose. And there's a lot of pests that are particularly resistant that attack the grain while it's in storage. Public health, that's in particular controlling mosquitoes and ticks that spread diseases. Consumer applications, if you like, personal repellents and fly sprays around the home. and animal health is protecting both companion animals and production animals. And our technology is applicable across all of these areas. Total market is around about US $31 billion per annum. So how do we generate value for our company? Well, it's a pretty simple but a tested model. We want to generate multiple revenue streams from technology license fees, milestone payments as we work towards registration, and then ultimately royalties as companies sell our technology in their end-use products. So our job is to secure and own the active ingredient product registrations. That's the registrations of our Qcide and Flavocide. We'll work with the major players around the world who are already selling insecticides, making products, and supporting those around the world. And we'll continue to develop proprietary manufacturing and production know-how, as well as further IP about our technology. I'll just go over this briefly because I want to go in a bit more detail, but we've been able to make some significant progress over the last 12 months or so. We've signed some commercial agreements. We've been able to attract some significant funding to keep us moving forward. We've got some further good results on efficacy on different pests. We've got a long way towards understanding our regulatory process, and indeed have employed a new global regulatory manager with some vast experience in that space. And we're strengthening our IP with know-how and additional patents around the world. So let's talk about some of those commercial agreements, because that's how our technology is getting to market. The first, as mentioned, is with a company called Evergreen Garden Care. It's people might have heard of Scott's Miracle Grow. You might have heard of the brand Scott's and Miracle Grow and Osmocote and Roundup use. This organisation was spun off the Scott's Miracle Grow company, which is based in the US. This is their international division that was sold off to a private equity firm a few years ago. We have an agreement with them for developing products with our active ingredients for the EU and for Australia and New Zealand. We've got the opportunity to grow that model with applications beyond the initial ones that we're focusing on, which is mosquitoes and ants control, and potentially also opening up different markets. The revenue model, we get license fees up front for offering them and giving them access to our IP, as well as offering exclusivity. There's milestone payments as we move towards the registration of our actives, and then we have an ongoing royalty payment program once products become commercialized. Client Mosquito Control is also mentioned. They're the largest vertically integrated public health company in the US, very significant organization that works all the way from discovery to deployment of their technology, the only company that really does this. So leaders in the field, we all remember when in the Brazil Olympics about 2016, there was an outbreak of Zika virus and it came up into Florida. These are the people the government called on to manage that. So these people know their market and they see the value of our technology and how it can contribute to the problems that they're facing of resistance and pushback from consumers about what kind of safe products that we can be using. Similar model to what we have with Evergreen, in that there's license fees and milestone payments and then ultimately royalty payments at the end. So some great validation for our technology by people who really know their markets and know the need for technology like ours. Another project we've been doing some work on Australia, I mentioned that the silos. We actually have a great centre of excellence in the Department of Ag up in Queensland who do a lot of work on these resistant pests. They're in fact in nature, as you can imagine, grain gets shipped around the world, so we see these pests everywhere. And they've been able to demonstrate the effectiveness of our technology to control pests that attack grain. So we've been working with them with an organisation called the Grains Research and Development Corporation, which is funded by grain growers in Australia, to help bring new technology to the market. And we hope to be moving forward on this project over the next 6 to 12 months. There's a lot of words on this page. I apologise for that, so we'll just stick to the highlights. But the other important areas that we need to consider is our IP. So what we're doing in that space, I mentioned patent allowances. We've had 2 new patents in Australia granted in the last 6 months and 1 in the US. And we've also got applications for those patents in around the world. And we've just recently done another patent application here in Australia specifically on our Qcide product. There are other, of course, types of IP, and the production processes of both products. We've done a lot of development work with people like CSIRO, and there's a lot of IP associated with that helps us with the cost of material and therefore suitability for commercial applications, but also in protecting the technology against other people who might want to make the product. Registering our products is really important, and I mentioned we've recently appointed a new head of global reg affairs. Sarah comes to us from a background with Bayer and Monsanto, has lots of experience in registering this kind of technology around the world, and is very well connected to the various reg bodies around the world, and is working very closely with our commercial partners on the registration process that we're undertaking. And manufacturing, well, we're moving through a scale-up phase with Flavocide. We're working with some organisations overseas to move through 100K and then 800K production cycles over the next 6 months or so. And Qcide, we harvest those trees up in Queensland, and we've done a lot of work with James Cook University to develop processes that help us improve that cost position as well. I just got back from Europe. I was talking to a number of commercial partners, including Evergreen, but also some potential companies that we think we're very close to being able to talk about in this kind of forum. There's a lot of excitement and a lot of reaffirmation for me about the need for our technology and talking to companies over there. So not only just some big global companies, but some local companies in there who are very good at their particular markets. MTAs are material transfer agreements. That's what helped us to create an agreement where these companies can trial our products in-house, but we maintain ownership of our IP and in fact, access to the data that they produce. And we continue to do our own testing on efficacy to make sure we're identifying new opportunities that we can take to companies. So we're hoping for some continuation of our good news over the last 18 months or so, with additional news flow in those areas of efficacy, commercial partnerships, intellectual property, and manufacturing. And we think we're in good shape to do that over the coming months. Long-term process is we expect first registrations of our products around 2026. So there's a bit of work naturally in registering the products with some of the toxicology work we have to do. But there's opportunities to create value along the way with more partnerships, bringing in license fees and milestone payments, even before we have commercial products. I just want to finish up by saying we've got a really good experienced board. I think we punch well above our weight for people with industry experience and ability to manage a company like ours that is an ASX listed company. So I'm privileged to be able to work with the board, but also our management team who have to manage a lot of different types of science and a lot of different cooperative parties to get the work done. So I'm going to finish there, and I would welcome some questions if you have any.
Thanks, Richard. We'll see if there's any questions from our Q&A audience. No, there isn't from the vote. So we'll go to the present audience questions. Thank you.
Well, Richard, I'd be interested in your comments in relation to what's happened in Sri Lanka and Poland. It's clear to me that whilst you mentioned climate change about 5 times, that it's climate change policy which is the bigger risk to the ag sector than climate change. And in fact, it would appear to me that in terms of worldwide production, we've never been in a stronger position in terms of the conditions for growing. So just I suspect it does help your company what's been happening there, but I'm just interested in your comments.
Yeah, look, and we always are getting better at growing food, if we talk about food production in particular. But, you know, the numbers we talk about there with 10 billion people in the next 30 years, it's estimated by the World Health Organization that that's a requirement of 50% more food than we make today. That's a significant increase on where we are. Why I think climate change is important is because it is going to have dramatic impacts on our ability to produce food the same way. You know, we're going to have more droughts, we're going to have more floods, we're going to have more hail events, and that all has impacts on the ability to produce food. So policies can help or they can inhibit what we need to do. Same with policies on registering new technologies, whether they be as simple as chemistry or biotechnologies and things like that. To me, though, we can't rest on our laurels, and I don't think we can expect that what we have today is going to get us into the future. So there's a lot of different technologies we have to embrace and adopt if we want to be able to reach our targets. Hope that answers the question at some point.
Any other questions from the floor?
So, Richard, given that Monsanto and Lyca and Movement sort of defended or GMO and the traditionally pretty nasty insecticides, are you seeing a change in appetite for this type of technology at that big level?
Yeah, it's a huge change. And really with the big companies as well driving it. Most of them are actually closing down a lot of what they call their synthetic chemistry discovery programs. And it's really embracing the natural discovery area, you know, what we can find in natural compounds. A lot of insecticides or a lot of products, even a lot of pharmaceuticals obviously have come out of the natural world. The problem is it's getting very hard to find stuff. We've scanned a lot of different technologies over the last 50, 60, 70 years. So the needle in the haystack is getting harder and harder to find. And having worked for those big companies who try to identify, pipeline opportunities for them, I know that they look to companies like us to bring discoveries to them. And that's why we get, you know, an audience with these big companies around the world and the opportunity to sit with them and talk about our technology.
Any further questions? We do have one submitted question. Richard, most of the audience are familiar with the human health regulatory pathways. Can you explain the process and timeline for agricultural registration?
Thanks. Yeah, that's a good question because it is a bit different. My background is certainly not pharmaceuticals, but I pick up a lot of people ask this. It is a rigorous process. We need to register our active ingredients, which means we have to demonstrate efficacy, you know, that it actually works, a certain level of safety, and therefore how we use the product and where it's made and how it's made. Probably the most rigorous within that is the toxicology studies. They can take a couple of years to prepare that information, and it can take a couple of years to actually review that data through the various bodies. In Australia, it's the APVMA. In the US, it's the EPA that reviews the data. Europe is a different beast as well. They're very diligent about their process. Not saying the others aren't, but they have a lot longer process as well. So there's a lot of challenges involved in that. But it isn't as expensive as bringing a pharmaceutical to the market, and it certainly doesn't take as long. As I mentioned, we expect to have our first registrations in about 2026.
And one very quick, short one, which is unusual for this sector. Why the share buyback? Is it excess cash?
The other day?
Yeah.
No, there was, it gets listed as a buyback. It was actually some long-term incentive shares that was offered to myself and management a while ago, and they were carried through to a point based on share price, and when we didn't hit that target, they got absorbed back into the company.
Are there some countries or regions that are more proactive in this field than others?
Countries, yeah, I suppose they are, but it's probably the way we're looking at it. It's company, you know, access for us. Let's talk about the EU. They're making it very difficult for current chemistry to survive. Very difficult, and their real push is to shut down as many existing products as they can. I didn't mention the name of them. It was on one of the slides. Neonicotinoids is a group of chemistry based on the nicotine molecule. It is our most successful class of chemistry out there. It works really well. It's the largest selling class of chemistry in the world. Unfortunately, it's also very good at controlling bees. So a lot of pressure on that. The EU have banned the top 3 chemistries within that class and expected to do more of that going forward. That'll put pressure on it around the world. And of course, what that does is put pressure on people saying, well, what do we replace these things with, right? What do we find that meets the criteria of being safer and effective? And there is this link to natural, right or wrong, but naturally derived technology has a better perception in the general consumer population. And as I mentioned before, there's a lot of expectation now from this kind of farm to plate situation about what happens to my food as it's being grown. So that's really important. Time for one more, or I don't want to go over time.
One more.
Be quick.
With clinical trials, most countries they ask you to do the trials within each country.
Right.
To make sure that it's safe. So, do you find that each country, what technology for their country?
The-
And
yeah.
assessment of their
So the general toxicology data is harmonised around the world. What we would have to do is different environmental fate data for, obviously you can imagine different countries have different climatic conditions. So we tend to have to redo some of that, but the toxicology stuff is the same.
Please thank Richard.
Thanks.
Next, we have Michael Johnson, CEO of Rhinomed. I'm going to introduce you, remember? I'm going to roast you. Rhinomed is a leader in wearable nasal technology with an innovative platform for improving airflow with drug delivery and diagnostic capabilities. They have designed COVID-19 nasal swab, Rhino Swab, and the world's first swab for children, Rhino Swab Junior. They have supply agreements signed with one of Canada's largest rat test manufacturers, BTNX. I'm sure we'll hear about that. An exclusive supply agreement with SureScreen Australia. Now, Michael joined Rhinomed in 2013 and has been responsible for the development of Rhinomed's nasal technology platform and steering Rhinomed to being a leading developer of wearable nasal medical technology. We'll hear how the company has brought 4 products to the market in global sleep and snoring, respiratory and nasal congestion markets, and is developing applications in the diagnostic and drug delivery markets. Over the course of his career, Michael has worked for large multinationals through to startup companies in life sciences, clean tech, again, financial services, and the media and communications industries. Michael received a Master's in Entrepreneurship and Innovation from Swinburne Uni and a bachelor's degree in business from Monash Uni. Michael is also a non-executive director of the US-based Foundation for Airway Health. Please join me in welcoming Michael.
Very disappointing, right? Okay. So, Rhinomed, we're a Melbourne-based company. Our mission is to change the way you breathe, you sleep, you take medication, you maintain your health by focusing on your nose. And if you think about medical devices, that's an area that a lot of people don't focus on. Everyone's focused on intravenous or gut, via the gut, but nobody really focuses on the nose. We own the nose. That's our focus, and we've got a number of products that we will show you, take you through to show you that. So, as I said, we're commercialising our nasal technology platform. Thanks to some of the folks here at FB Rice, we've developed a significant IP, over 60 patents, 57 design patents, trademarks, that really cover everything you can do with our technology once it's in the nose. And our focus is on wearing it, rather than just putting it in episodically, but actually wearing a technology and assuming if you can convince people to wear it, what else can you do with it? So we actually have focused on not only doing that, we're actually focused on commercializing it. So we actually not only trying to build IP, we're trying to build a customer base. And a lot of our customers are now some of the world's leading pharmacies, be it Walgreens in the US, Boots in the UK, Terry White here in Australia, etc. And of course, online. We've seen this really emerge over the last 2 years with Amazon in particular. The other thing is we're building clinical data to ensure that we've got really clear data and efficacy that supports our efficacy proposition, but also the fact that our product is actually comfortable to wear and usable. So as you can see there, there's 3 real key focuses for us. It's building a world-class consumer health business focused on our technology. It's on this idea of creating a gold standard for sample collection. I'll explain what I mean by that shortly. And then it's about taking our technology and showing that if you're wearing it in the nose, we can actually use it as a nasal drug delivery platform as well. Right. So how are we going? Well, we've actually had a bit of a cracking year last financial year, which has been really important. The momentum's been building for a number of years, but we really got some traction in the last year. FY22 results was up about 134% to 9.1. Receipts was up 200% to 8.8. Revenues for the fourth quarter up to 2.32, which is about 156% on the same quarter last year. Receipts likewise was up. Our balance sheet is really strong. We've got no debt. We've got a line of credit provided by our directors, which gives us the working capital if we need. We've got accounts receivables. We've got a really strong pipeline in terms of sales that are coming through on a quarter-by-quarter basis. Our consumer health business alone was up to 6 million off the base of 3.8 the previous year.
Our store numbers are up. We increased our presence in Walgreens, for instance, up to chain-wide from Mute to 7,000 stores. Amazon growth has tripled in it since 2020. And then if we look at the swab business, which we actually developed the initial concept for the swab in March of 2020, we've moved through not just prototyping into regulatory, into clinical. We're now in production, and in fact, we're selling product globally. But the first customers, I'm pleased to say, were government here in New South Wales and Victoria. We each ordered 1 million, as I'll get to shortly. We're now supplying to rapid antigen tests both here in Australia and Canada, which is great. And that really, I suppose, is the baseline of the company going forward. We've now inked deals with both BTNX and SureScreen that guarantee a minimum 32.5 million swabs over the next 24 months. And that will really drive our revenue. And although I'm not in the business of providing guidance, that's something we'll probably look at the half year. So in a really great position, and the momentum is continuing. So what markets are we focused on? Well, in terms of our consumer health business, the primary focus is really on this snoring opportunity that we've uncovered. One of the things that attracted me to Rhinomed right back in 2013, as Matt said, was the fact that GSK had bought the Breathe Right strip business. You may recall that piece of gaffer tape that goes across the nose. GSK bought that for 566 million. And it was the only product in the market for snoring. And it really was until we launched Mute. There's a lot of rats and mice out there, but there's no real dominant brand in the snoring market. And we saw a really big opportunity in that consumer health space to establish a brand and try and drive a global franchise, which is what we're doing. We have a niche product in the form of Turbine, which is exactly a similar sort of product, a nasal stent designed to help people breathe during sleep. And I'm pleased to say that there was a Canadian cyclist in the women's team sprint who won the silver wearing the Turbine 2 nights ago, which is great. And then we have the Pronto, which is our sort of first step into nasal drug delivery. This is a product that actually has a vapor in it. So if you think about the Vicks, it's something that you can wear overnight for up to 8 hours. And we have the ability to tailor that delivery mode from anything as short as 15 seconds up to 15 hours if that was the need. So it really shows the breadth of our platform and that it is actually indeed a true platform. You can see some of these down the bottom, some of the stores, as I mentioned, that we're in globally. We do focus on that idea of building a global franchise. And more importantly, with Amazon and online, that's a real focus for us now. So much so that we moved our entire sales and marketing operation to the US at the start of 2020. And that's been very much the reason why our ratings on Amazon, and indeed our Amazon business, has continued to grow. We're primarily focused on Amazon in the US, and I'm pleased to say that we're now just entered Amazon UK, and we'll be going into Germany in the second half of this financial year as well. So why snoring? Well, half of you snore. And that's the bad news and also the good news for us. So we recently, at the start of this year, released our annual sleep and snoring report. The US, UK, and Australia, 6,000 people identified the numbers of people with snoring, the impact on health. We also authored probably one of the most significant things that we have done as a company, a study that looked at the connection between sleep and suicide that's recently been published in the Journal of Clinical Psychiatry that clearly shows that actually the suicide risk increases between the hours of 12 and 4, which makes sense. If you know anybody who's been exposed to that terrible issue, it certainly makes sense. And that's something that we as a company are focused on, is very much trying to help people to not just get to sleep, but stay asleep, and breathing is a critical aspect of that. We also, I should hasten to add, do play a role more as a companion therapy with sleep apnea. If you think about sleep apnea devices, both oral devices and masks, if you've got any form of nasal obstruction, then their efficacy and the compliance goes down. Our stent actually can improve that by opening up the nose, allowing you to breathe better, and has been shown to actually help improve compliance. And that's something that we're actually looking to partner with on a study later this year. So, as I mentioned, on Amazon, this is probably one of the highlights of the last financial year, is that on one stage on Amazon, we're outselling Breathe Right, which is a fantastic achievement. GSK divested Breathe Right, hopefully not because of us, but it'd be nice to think it was, late last year to a foundation brand in the US. So we're taking full advantage of that opportunity, and we are doing really well, which is fantastic. And to give you an understanding of what that means, there's about over 300 brands on Amazon in that category,
And then within the sleep category, there's about 200,000. So it's a big segment. The way you're going to look at Amazon, it's like Woolies, but online. So to be number one in a segment is really significant and a great achievement of the team and reflective of the strategies that we've got in place and the team we've got on the ground in the US. So upper respiratory infections. So obviously everyone's way too familiar now with upper respiratory infections, sadly. It's not going to go away. COVID's here forever. No matter what you hear or think or may believe, it is here forever. It doesn't suddenly disappear. The variants are coming through thick and fast. Obviously, flu is also seasonal. That's coming through at the moment. RSV is also getting a lot more prevalent and is equally as severe sometimes, especially in pediatrics. Children can die of RSV. There are a whole lot of other respiratory infections. And obviously, the way you collect a sample for that is one of these little beauties, which I'm sure all of you had been stabbed in the head with one of those at some stage or other. That is still the gold standard when it comes to sampling for upper respiratory disease. Saliva is good, but the simple fact is saliva is the most unreliable of all. And all you need to do is go and look at, if you search up Colgate and COVID, you'll be able to see the research that Colgate published that shows if you wash your mouth out with Listerine or brush your teeth, it actually neutralizes the virus for up to an hour. So in effect, saliva is not a reliable form of sampling. Nasal swabs are, but as you all know, that's neither pleasant nor attractive. So what have we done? We've actually created a new swab, a new form of swab. The actual inspiration came from my father, who was in a nursing home, who complained about being stabbed in the head with one of these. And so why don't you do something about it? So what we decided to do was indeed create a swab that was actually comfortable, but more importantly, can be used. This will be the only presentation you'll ever go to where somebody sticks a swab in his nose and keeps talking without crying. But actually what this does is actually it's collecting a sample from both nostrils simultaneously. By about 15 seconds, which is about now, it's already collected 1.4 times greater yield than the standard swab. And I could actually, if you want, if you put your hands up and vote, I'll wear this the entire presentation without any discomfort. What's really important is that the low capacity is increased, and that's critically important for rapid antigen tests where there's no amplification. So it's a one in, one out. The limit of detection is dependent on how well you do this and how much of a sample you collect. The loading time is critical. So at 15 seconds, it's collected a bigger load, as I mentioned. That's critically important. The other critical thing which we identify, especially within the entire diagnostic process, everything is standardized except this. Now, all of you will have been gone to in the drive-through or gone in to see somebody to collect it. Depending on the night that the nurses had before, will determine how effectively she does this. So whether you do it or I do it, it'll be very, very random, the sample collection process. Our swab standardizes because it goes into your nose, exactly the same spot. It targets just below the lower turbinate, where you have goblet cells and ciliated cells, which is where the ACE2 receptors are, which is what the virus is targeting. And it's repeatable, reliable, and predictable. And that is a critical aspect that is missing from the entire sampling and testing process at the moment. Doesn't matter whether it's PCR, lab-based, or whether it's actually a rapid antigen test. So, and of course, one of the things we identified early on is that kids hate it. In fact, the Royal Children's Hospital did a study that showed that about 5-year-old children, 80% of parents won't bring their kids forward for testing because of the trauma associated with swabbing. And that goes down to about 30% of 12-year-olds. So that's a real impediment to any public health response. So we designed a swab that not only is more effective clinically, but also is something they want to wear. And what we discovered is that everyone loves a funny moustache, just as they love emojis and koalas and lips and so on. So what we then went back to the Royal Children's with the Murdoch Children's Research Institute, repeated a clinical trial with them. 8 out of 10 kids preferred our swab. The other 2 were obviously either serial killers or didn't want to be swabbed at all. But more importantly, from a clinical perspective, it was the efficacy level was the same as a combined nose and throat swab. And that's critically important from an industry perspective. We do not want to be bringing a technology that is not clinically gold standard. And our strategy and our goal here is to be nothing less than the gold standard for nasal collection. So it was a great program. That actually image is out of the newly released annual report from the MCRI, which was released just yesterday, in fact. Now, so what do we do now? So we're off to, we just recently, in fact, I got back on Sunday from the AACC, the American Association of Clinical Chemistry, where we launched the swab at the at their big conference, big show. And I'll see if I can. How do I do this? That's not what I want to do.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. Yeah. So that was a, how do I give it? Yeah. Wow. I'm sure he's doing it, not me. So that was great because there's about 800 companies there, all the big guys, Biomeria, Thermo Fisher, BD, and we're the only guys that got picked up and put on TV, which is probably my 15 seconds of fame. But it really is focusing on this idea that the issue and the need we've identified is universal. And so our job is now to try and work out, well, how do we take that to market? Obviously, we know that it works equally well with both pathology labs and also rapid antigen tests. As I mentioned, the Victorian and New South Wales governments were some of our first customers. We're actively engaged in talking with the big path companies about integrating it into their processes. But then we also realized the high volume from our perspective is, of course, rapid antigen test companies. And with that in mind, we announced 2 deals in the last 6 months. The first one was BT&X. BT&X is Canada's largest RAT company. They've provided over 390 million to date to the Canadian government, which is no mean feat. And then SureScreen Australia, which is a local affiliate of the SureScreen UK, which is one of the UK's largest RAT companies there as well. 22.5 million, minimum of 22.5 million over 24 months with BT&X, a minimum of 10 million for SureScreen, obviously over the next 24 months. So we're starting to get a nice contracted pipeline of opportunity and production that we can push through our system. That's critically important. Once again, it baselines the company from a revenue perspective. And that then segues nicely to production. At the moment, we're producing the product both here in Melbourne, out of Keysborough, and China. We need to now diversify, obviously, for geopolitical reasons, if nothing else, out of China into the UK and the US, which we're in the process of doing, in order to respond to demand. As I mentioned, this is not going to go this is not going to go away anytime soon. And because we're not just COVID focused, we're focused on all upper respiratory infection, we see a real significant opportunity to expand the business. And that's the way we need to do it in order to actually produce, supply, and then invoice. So a bit about the company, very tightly held. Whitney George is the CEO of Sprott, which is a multi-billion dollar fund, I should say, in the US, owns a fairly massive slice of the company. Professor John McBain, who's one of the founders of Melbourne IVF, also one of the founding investors of Afterpay. He holds 18%. Ron Dewhurst, who used to not only be the CEO of IOOF, was also running JP Morgan's Legg Mason division in the US for a long period of time. He's our chair and owns about a little bit over 6%. All 3 of those gentlemen are also customers of our mute product. So they allegedly snore, or they used to. They no longer. snore because they actually not only use the product, but they also invested in the company. So a bit like a Victor Kiam thing. I liked it so much I bought the company, and that's what we recommend you all do. Don't buy stock in the company, buy the product first, experience it, and then if you actually experience it and think it's right, then you actually know what you're investing in. Share price has gone up and down over the period. The market really hasn't seemed to recognise the deals we've done with both BTNX and SureScreen, in our opinion. But over time, with the revenues that these deals will generate and the pipeline that we have that we're trying to execute at the moment, we certainly believe the market will suddenly start to recognise the value that lies in the platform overall. So on that point, I will pause for questions. I'm happy to, I've got some product over there that you're more than welcome to come and have a look. And if you're feeling like you need to stick a swab at your nose, I can facilitate that as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. No questions? No questions from our webinar audience. Our local audience, questions?
What's the number of people that you know that snore during the day
When
when they're awake?
they're awake, that I'd put that into probably the serial killer mode, but not a lot, I wouldn't think. I mean, nasal snoring that sort of snoring does sound like it's coming from the nose. So that's sort of, it's not normal. I mean, generally you'd have to be pretty rare that they're snoring when they're awake, but it would really be a sign of some pretty significant nasal obstruction. So they should definitely go and see an ENT on that.
Mike, could you just expand a little bit on manufacturing?
Yep.
How that's going? What in terms of expanding?
Yep. So we have we invested significantly over the course of this calendar year in our manufacturing, especially here in Australia. So we've actually we've actually got a bespoke operation out in Keysborough where we've put in place the injection molding, the flocking, the packaging, the sterility, the clean room facility to allow us to produce up to about, increase that to about 2 million a month.
Effect on cost on that? What's the China cheaper production? What's the base?
Well, one of the great, so the main advantage China's always had is that the labour component is very low. But what we're doing and the way we're able to automate it with volumes, we can bring this down significantly. It doesn't really matter where the location will be.
We'll hold that up again. How does anyone get that into a rat? I'll show you. A rat tube.
Glad you asked. Here's one I prepared earlier. So it works exactly the same way. So literally, it's designed so it just snaps off.
Okay. That's good.
Goes into any rat tube.
And it couldn't snap off in there?
Nope.
No?
Nope.
Just from the consumer's point of view, obviously, if you have to pay for your own tests all the time, cost does matter.
Yeah.
What's the difference here? Obviously, you pay a premium to have a better experience.
Yeah.
But what is the premium charge relative to that?
Yeah. So we are the swabs are more expensive than the Chinese manufactured swabs, and there's no question about that. But it's all relative because it's all under 80 cents US. So we're not talking sheep stations. But when you're faced with a screaming child and you say, "Do you want to stick a moustache up your nose?" they all go yes. Versus if you attack them with a chopstick, they're like, "Run for the hills."
So I've sort of got a related question. You had it up your nose and you said it's sitting in the right area.
Yeah.
Does that mean all those nasal swabs that we've had that actually did tickle our brain have gone too far?
Well, there's no clinical evidence. Well, there's the nasal pharyngeal is probably the gold standard, but nobody's doing that.
Is that up and down?
That's right to the back through the nose. So what they're now doing is doing an anterior nares and a throat, and that's now the most common swabbing that you'll get if you go to a hospital and so on. So what we've shown is that our swab, because it's in there for longer, it's catching a sample from both nostrils simultaneously, is actually clinically equivalent.
And to Mark's question before, there was a pre-submitted question. It was about manufacturing. I think you've answered that, but a couple of related questions. What does 22 million BTNX and 10 million SureScreen look like on the company's financials?
Very good.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. We didn't disclose, and we don't want to give go forward and start giving forecasts, as I said, to probably the half yearly. But we've more than doubled our revenues this year, and we would expect that momentum to continue.
So then the corollary of that is will you give any guidance as to when you might break even?
I would expect that at the half yearly we will well and truly be doing that.
Okay, congratulations. Any other questions from the floor? I've got one more pre-submitted question. The $64,000 question, showing my age. Which multinational healthcare companies might be interested in buying Rhinomed in the future?
That's a great question. So if you think about, if we break it down into the different components, some of you may be aware that GSK spun out their consumer health division recently. I think it's got Haleon or something like that. That's obviously a target if as they look to expand their consumer health portfolio. Obviously, in the swab world, there's two major manufacturers. There's Copan, which is Italian, and Puritan in the US. Both those companies have been under a lot of pressure from the Chinese-based manufacturers who have been attacking their market. This would obviously be a really clear opportunity for them to differentiate their portfolio and offering. The other important thing that I suppose is worth realizing is that when you look at testing pre-pandemic, it was homogenous. We've identified that actually testing the most vulnerable populations and the populations that are more likely to be tested more frequently is the pediatric and the geriatric aged care markets. So we see we've created something that's safer for the geriatric market and more attractive to the pediatric market.
Please thank Michael. Thank you all for attending and those on the webinar, and also thanks to FP Rice for hosting. A full recording of this will be available on Monsoon's YouTube channel soon hereafter. What is it, day or two? Yeah, day or two. And now I invite the local attendees to have some refreshments and further discussion with our speakers. Thank you very much.